The Stolen Generation. When Europeans first arrived in Australia, they encountered its immense indigenous population. What began as a timid camaraderie quickly transformed into a fierce rivalry when Europeans' motives became clear: the accumulation of land and natural resources.
The Aboriginal peoples were then labeled as savages, animals unworthy of the freedom which they had held for centuries. In 1824, the settlers were given official permission to shoot Aborigines on sight. The Australian genocide had begun.
What preceded was the murder of 470,000 indigenous souls from 1788 to 1911, all sanctified by the British government in Australia. Aboriginal men were sterilized, women were bred with white males, and children were forcibly adopted into white families.
The Australian government personally oversaw the abduction of 100,000 children. These young victims were immediately institutionalized, forced to learn English, accept Christianity, and in many cases, overworked much like slaves.
The methodic extermination of Australia's native people and their oppression through legislation continued until the late 1960s. By then it was too late. 15 out of every 16 Aborigines had been murdered or abducted.
A plague of suicides ensued as mourning mothers could not cope with the loss of their beloved children. Entire families were wiped out, and the Aboriginal people as a whole suffered from European subjugation.
Government officials justified these abductions and abuses by citing that the removal was the best solution for providing a productive, civilized life for the displaced children. But since when has kidnapping been civilized?
Rabbit Proof Friends, a 2002 documentary and autobiography, recalls the story of Doris, an Aboriginal child who was abducted but then escaped her foster settlement. When she had at last found her biological mother at the age of 25, Doris could no longer speak her native tongue and feared Aboriginal culture because of her European brainwashing.
In 2008, the Australian government formally apologized to the descendants of Aborigines, particularly to the Stolen Generation, but for most, words alone are not enough to compensate for a life of traumatization.
Time has now come for the nation to turn a new page. A new page in Australia's history by righting the wrongs of the past and so moving forward with confidence to the future. We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on these our fellow Australians. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country. For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind, we say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry. And for the indignity and degradation thus inflicted on a proud people and a proud culture, we say sorry. We, the Parliament of Australia, respectfully request that this apology be received in the spirit in which it is offered, as part of the healing of the nation. For the future, we take heart, resolving that this new page in the history of our great continent can now be written. We today take this first step by acknowledging the past and laying claim to a future that embraces all Australians. A future where this Parliament resolves that the injustices of the past must never, never happen again.